The LG Gram 17 Pro is magical. It is a really special device. It's got a huge screen, powerful components including a dedicated GPU, yet it only weighs 1.5 kilos. For my American friends, that's 3.2 pounds. Anyway, for a laptop like this, it's just crazy light. It just makes it a joy to carry around. Now, I did think this laptop would be a hot mess. Shoving a powerful CPU and dedicated GPU inside a thin and light chassis, it doesn't normally end well. But I was delighted that it wasn't. When I was editing one of our videos, it was smooth as butter and it was very comfortable to use. That being said, the components in this laptop, they do perform worse than when they're in a larger gaming laptop with better cooling. Anyway, what's the catch here? Well, its price is ridiculous. Our model with the RTX 5050 is going for $3,200. I don't know what LG's team is smoking over there, but that is insane. There is no way a laptop with an RTX 5050 is worth that much. This laptop should only be purchased when it's on a massive sale. Make sure to head on over to our website bestlaptops.deals, as we do call out when we feel a laptop's current price makes it a good deal or a great one. You can even set up custom price drop notifications. We feel $2,200 is reasonable for this machine. Now, if you don't need the dedicated GPU, there is a non-pro model called the LG Gram 17. It has a more reasonable price tag. There is also 16-inch versions of both these laptops. Well, with that said, let's get into the details. Our 17-inch Gram Pro includes one of Intel's Core Ultra 9 H-Series 2 CPUs. These CPUs are for performance laptops that are still light enough to be portable, so it's a good CPU to include here. However, when placed in the Gram's chassis, it doesn't perform as well as it does in other laptops. On its best performance mode, it falls behind the Zephyrus G16 and the Transcend 14 with the same CPU. That's in Geekbench, by the way, which tests a variety of common performance tasks that you may actually do on your laptop. In Cinebench, which tests the laptop's performance when it's maxed out, it falls further behind. Not only is it now significantly behind those other laptops, but it even falls behind the Alienware 16 Aurora with its Core 7 processor. That processor is based on an architecture from 2 years ago. Now, keep in mind, those other laptops are much heavier gaming ones. Even the Omen Transcend, it's a little heavier, and that's a 14-inch laptop. Realistically, LG has sacrificed the cooling solution and performance for the laptop's lighter weight. And when we look at power draw, it does confirm this. The processor in the Gram is fed a lot less than other laptops with this CPU. When we look at CPU temps during this test, you can see this in action once again. Even with so little wattage fed to its processor, the CPU still gets hot. Hotter than what it gets in the Zephyrus G16. As I showed you, that laptop feeds this processor more power, which makes it perform better. Now, during CPU-intensive tasks, the Gram gets very warm to the touch. When compared to the ZenBook S16 though, which is another thin portable 16-inch laptop, the Gram is cooler, so that's definitely a positive, especially given that the Gram has a dedicated GPU and the ZenBook doesn't. Fan noise during this time was decent, certainly audible but much quieter than gaming laptops. Now, if you open LG's My Gram app, you can change the cooling mode. This is essentially its performance mode. There is a big drop in fan noise if you move down from max to high, which is good, and you don't lose that much performance. Short burst power is around the same, but average power draw, which we measured over a 10-minute test, is a lot less. Now, everything that I just said was of course looking at performance tasks that only use the CPU, but this laptop has a dedicated GPU. So I edited one of our videos on it and it did really well. It cut through the timeline like butter with very little stuttering. That was at least when I ran it on its max mode. That video, it didn't have a lot of effects in it though, so it was a pretty simple one as far as our videos go. When we look at Puget's Premiere Pro benchmark, it does confirm what I just told you. The Gram beats out the M4 Pro MacBook Pro 14 and comes close to our RTX 5060 and 5070 gaming laptops. This is a very solid result. Unfortunately, we don't have any other RTX 5050 laptops in yet to compare this one to. Don't worry, we will get some in. Switching over to DaVinci Resolve, it's another good showing, but not quite as good as Premiere. Here the Gram falls further behind our RTX 5060 gaming laptop. In this test, the MacBook Pro does much better. The Gram, it's still a good amount ahead though of the MacBook Air 15. Well, what about gaming? For what this laptop is, it's not bad. It's certainly not great, but you can game. In TimeSpy, the Gram performs around twice as fast as the Slim 7 i15, which has the best integrated graphics in a Windows laptop. But the gram falls considerably behind our gaming laptops with higher tier GPUs. This is not only because the gram has a 5050, which is a low-end dedicated GPU, but it's also because it feeds its GPU less wattage, 65 watts. The Transcend 14 also feeds its GPU less wattage. You can see the effect of this on screen. The Aurora, with its 5060, beats the Transcend with its supposedly better 5070 because of the power draw differences. We've seen laptops feed 5050 GPUs like the one in the gram up to 100 watts. Anyway, where this leads us is that you can play older AAA games like Forza if you turn down the settings a bit or turn on DLSS frame gen and upscaling. Seth did want me to mention that you do need to run the laptop on max mode though. He detected significant throttling on the other modes. Now, if you're just playing esports titles though, it should be a breeze on this laptop and it should be able to make use of its fast refresh rate display. If you're looking for any advanced gaming features like Advanced Optimus or a Mux switch, you won't find any of them here. Now, I want to show you our 3D Mark Wildlife results, as that's a gaming benchmark that uses Vulkan. This allows us to compare this laptop to Apple's MacBooks. Here you can see that the gram with its power-limited RTX 5050 performs worse than the MacBook Pro 14 with an M4 Pro chip. However, it is significantly faster than a MacBook Air. Now, if you're gaming on the gram, just a warning, it does get really warm to the touch. That being said, when I was video editing, I found it surprisingly comfortable. A little warm, yes, but not terrible. I was running on max mode and I definitely did hear the fans going. Finally, I haven't told you what this laptop is like in light use, just browsing the web and writing the script for this very video. It was a joy to use, it was quiet and it felt cool to the touch. I've talked a lot about using this laptop in a coffee store. Well, how does it do on battery? When you unplug it, you'll be pleased to know that you can run it at its full performance, at least the CPU. In fact, out of the laptops we compared it to, it performs well on battery. Its GPU though does drop a couple of watts when unplugged. In terms of runtimes, it's bad, but before you freak out, we need some context. When you look at our Office rundown test, which we feel is more realistic than a video playback test, it doesn't fall that far behind other laptops with a dedicated GPU. It's about 1 hour less than the Zephyrus G16, which by the way is one of the best gaming laptops we've tested for battery life. And you need to consider the Gram 17 has a larger screen to power. In fact, the only laptops that last substantially longer than it are those that don't have a dedicated GPU. So yes, it's not the best battery life, but it's also kind of around what we'd expect. Now let's talk about the chassis. It's magical to get a laptop with a 17-inch display that is this light. It's amazing, especially given the high performance components inside. Every single one of us who tested this laptop was delighted at how wonderful it was to carry around. Even if you bring the charger with you, it's a small charger, only 100 watts is needed. That's the benefit of having a low-end dedicated GPU inside that isn't fed that much wattage. Now, this laptop's weight comes with compromises, as I showed you. One is its cooling solution. The other is how rigid its chassis feels. The bottom part of this laptop, including the keyboard, it's actually more rigid than we would have thought, but the display has a lot of flex to it. In terms of how it looks, the Gram looks like a big charcoal-coloured laptop. Once you touch it though, its matte coating feels pretty nice, and it doesn't pick up fingerprints nearly as much as other dark-coloured laptops. The display has good colour reproduction and it refreshes up to 144 Hz, so movement on screen looks nice and smooth. On paper, the display is bright at 417 nits, but not super bright. However, the Gram does have a trick up its sleeve. It is a matte panel. That means it doesn't need additional brightness to combat reflections. Using it out in the real world, I found it was bright enough, at least in the coffee store I wrote this review at. Other than its brightness, the one area I'd like to see LG improve is its resolution. It's a 2560 by 1600 panel. Stretching those pixels across a large 17-inch display, it just isn't ideal. That ends up being 178 pixels per inch, which falls just below what we would consider a crisp display. By comparison, MacBooks have a PPI well over 200. Because of this, text just looks ever so slightly fuzzy. I really would like to see LG put a 2880 by 1800 panel in this laptop, at least in the 17-inch version. This all being said, as a whole, the display is a strong suit of this laptop. It's the only portable laptop that I know of where I can sit in a coffee store and run it in split screen mode. It was so helpful to have my script up on the left side and my test results on the right. Anyway, let's move on to the keyboard. Unfortunately, it is one of the least comfortable keyboards I've used in the last 2 years. The keys feel very low travel. If you remember the hated butterfly keyboards on Apple's MacBooks between 2016 and 2019, it's kind of like one of those. Also, these keys, they drop below the keyboard deck when pressed. Many of us here, we just find that annoying. I made a ton of typing errors when I was writing the script for this video, and I just ended up screaming obscenities. Even its two-stage backlight, it's there, but light escapes around the keys, so from some angles you may find it hard to figure out which key is which, because you can be blinded by the light coming out the side. Now, before we move on from the keyboard, I do want to add one point. When I reviewed my findings with the team, Sierra added that she used the laptop for a couple of days, and she didn't like the keyboard either. However, she found it more mediocre than outright horrible, so that's your range. The trackpad is also not great. Tracking isn't as smooth as I'd like, and the mechanical click feels cheap. Now, on the left side of the gram, you get 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports and an HDMI 2.1 port. On the right side, 2 USB-A ports and a headphone mic combo jack. Port selection isn't too bad, but for a creator-focused laptop in a large 17-inch chassis, it should have an SD card reader. Also, we'd really like to see a charging-capable port on either side. It would just make charging so much more convenient. Speakers are surprisingly decent. They get very loud, they do have bass, which is rare on a laptop like this, but the sound is a bit muddy. Also, please note the speakers are downward facing. If you do use this laptop on a blanket, it will significantly reduce its sound quality. Here's how the webcam looks and sounds on the LG Gram 17. It's a 1080 webcam that doesn't have a privacy shutter. And now I've turned off our studio lights, and here's what it looks like in a somewhat darker environment. If you want to upgrade the laptop, the screws are underneath the rubber feet. They were easier to get off than we would have thought. Once you open up the back, you'll get access to 2 SSD slots. One is populated by the SSD that the laptop comes with. When it comes to Linux, we did test Fedora 42. Everything worked other than the speakers. That includes the camera, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, brightness up and down, the trackpad. Those things were good. Alright, let's wrap. If LG intends to charge $3,000 or more for this laptop with its low-end dedicated GPU, everything else about it needs to be perfect. It needs to have a high-resolution display, perhaps even a tandem OLED. It needs to have a much better keyboard. It needs to have a haptic trackpad. It needs to have Thunderbolt 5 with charging-capable ports on either side, an SD card reader, Gen 5 NVMe SSD, a better webcam. You guys get the point. That being said, if its price drops, we really like the Gram and highly recommend it. It's a super unique laptop and a very special one. As we showed you, it does not perform as well as gaming laptops with these components, but compared to other thin and light, large screen laptops, it does shine. It's more powerful than the MacBook Air and destroys the ZenBook S16. Its only real downside for a buyer of this kind of laptop is its keyboard. But those other ones, they don't have the best keyboards either. Sierra said if she had to give up her external monitor, she would want the Gram 17. Large screen, very light with good performance, but she absolutely isn't willing to pay $3,200 for it. So, as I said, if you're interested in the Gram, go over to our website bestlaptop.deals and set a custom price drop notification and just wait for a good sale. Or if you don't need the dedicated GPU, just go for the Gram 17 Non-Pro, which is more appropriately priced. Till next time, go do something awesome with your day, and I will catch you later.